Welcome. All right, welcome to today's DataVox webinar, Cybercriminals are going phishing while we work from home, presented by KnowBe4. My name is Jessica and I will be your moderator today. We are broadcasting this webinar through Cisco WebEx events, and the audio can be heard through your PC or by calling into the phone number listed and with the access code provided in your confirmation email or calendar invite for this event. Today's webinar is being recorded on behalf of DataVox, and participation in this event indicates your consent to being included in that recording. All attendees will receive an email with a link to the completed recording 24 to 48 hours post-event. If you have questions for the presenters at any time during this presentation, you may submit those questions via the Q&A feature to the bottom right of your screen. This should already be turned on. Simply click Q&A and the text box will appear. Our panel will be responding to these questions throughout the presentation via text and verbally at the conclusion of this presentation. If you are in need of support or have a question not pertaining to today's topic, please utilize the chat feature and I will be happy to assist you. This feature is separate from the Q&A feature and can be turned on by clicking the chat bubble in the lower center of your screen. Now that we have reviewed the features of this webinar, we would like to start off today's presentation with a few words from our cybersecurity solutions architect, Paul Yao. Paul, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Jessica. All right, good morning, everyone. My name is Paul Yao, Solutions Architect focused on cybersecurity. So I would like to thank you, everyone, for taking the time to join us for our webinar in partnership with KnowBe4. So as we patiently wait for things to return back to normal, business partners and employees like us must maintain constant communication via a variety of technologies, right? So from small business, education, healthcare systems, government entities, and enterprise. And we can all agree that email is probably primarily a communication method. And so we know it, and so do the cyber criminals. And we have probably witnessed a lot of cyber attacks and data exfiltration, and quite often it comes from credential being stolen or that it leads to account takeover. And the account being taken over, the delivery process of ransomware can be a lengthy process and can gain access without triggering any alert. And this is their priority, so they can recon and map out the strengths and the weaknesses of your network infrastructure. Therefore, we're partnered with KnowBe4 to provide a series of training which can help you to identify threats coming from email, social engineering, and other methods. So I believe the term that we use is human firewall. It's the term, and by enabling everyone to turn on this human firewall features, we hope that we can better protect our intellectual properties and have a better safe communication. So let me introduce Eric from KnowBe4, our security awareness expert. Eric?
All right, thank you very much, Paul. I really appreciate it. Yeah, you know, it's an interesting thing. Obviously, we're going to talk today about how it's happening with everybody working from home and the new things that are happening with that. And believe it or not, the cyber criminals have gone crazy during this time. So we're going to cover some of that. We're going to cover how to protect yourself and a number of things like that. I want to get into the psychology behind why this is such an important time as well. So this should be a lot of fun. We should learn quite a few things out of this. Again, feel free to ask questions in the Q&A over there on the side. And at the end, we will be answering as many of those as we can. So first of all, a little bit about me. My name is Eric Crone. I'm the security awareness advocate here at KnowBe4. That is an actual title. Really what it means is I get to take my experience in decades of information security and IT work and share it with other people. So I've been in all kinds of industries from healthcare to manufacturing. I spent about 10 years with the U.S. Army and ended up the security manager at the 2nd Regional Cyber Center Western Hemisphere. I've seen attacks from all around the world on some pretty interesting government and Army networks. But one of the things that has always been going on and has been going on since the beginning of my career is phishing attacks, attacks on the people. That's really what it is. And what we're going to talk about today is how these phishing attacks are really very much an emotional and psychological attack. And quite frankly, these folks are pretty good at what they're doing. So to tell you a little bit about us with KnowBe4, we are about 32,000 customers strong, I think, right now. we do security awareness training and a simulated phishing platform. And of course, DataVox is one of our resellers. They can handle all of the things you need to do with this. But the idea is we provide training to end users in an online, on-demand format, and then you do simulated phishing attacks to help those people get a chance to practice things in a fail-safe environment. That's the idea. So they're exposed to this before they get it. Think of it as like getting an inoculation, right? We get the flu shot. Our bodies are introduced to that. We now know how to spot that flu virus and go after it. So it's no longer an issue for us. That's how that works. So having said that, onto the topic of this, we have seen huge amounts of attacks. We tracked these for a little bit here. You can see on this chart, the last few weeks there, starting in March, so March 8th through the 14th, this is brand new phishing templates that we saw in the wild. In other words, things that the bad guys are using to attack people, and these are COVID-19 related ones. So if you look there, March 8th through March 14th, we saw 16 brand new attack templates in the wild that were being used to attack people. The next week, we saw 36 of them. That's a pretty significant jump. But look at that last one, the 22nd through the 28th. We saw 94 brand new templates being used to attack people using the COVID-19 pandemic or coronavirus pandemic as their attack surface. And the reason behind this is there's a lot of chaos going on, right? People are worried. They're scared. There's a lot of fear going on. There's a lot of misinformation going on. There's a lot of lack of information going on. And people are really wanting a lot of information, right? Because they're not getting it, they're starved for information. The bad guys know this. So anytime our emotions are on high alert, the attackers know to go after this. We see this in pretty much every type of natural or man-made event, whether it be hurricanes, whether it be, whatever. Whenever there's a big event that's newsworthy, people want more information, and it tends to be an emotional thing. And people, the bad guys, they know, and they jump on that and attack that. Now, interestingly enough, Google released something the other day. And mind you, Google's a pretty big email provider, but they are not by far the biggest, okay? And they were saying that they are blocking about 18 million COVID-19 phishing attacks every single day. 18 million of their 100 million a day that they block. That's pretty significant when almost 20% of them going out there phishing attacks are COVID-19 related. They block over 240 million spam emails every day. And we're not even talking about the spam stuff, the things that are trying to get you to buy, these testing kits from, overseas and things like that. We're talking about actual phishing attacks. That's a huge, huge number. So you can kind of get an idea. And knowing that there are other email providers, Office 365 is a huge one. This number is pretty substantial. So the first thing we got to understand is this little saying from a book, Art of War. You might have heard of it, fairly recent book. Sun Tzu wrote this, and it's not an information security, presentation if you don't have some sort of quote from Art of War. But this one is particularly powerful to me. All warfare is based on deception, and that's what's happening. Now, sometimes people may think, oh, warfare is a strong word, but let me tell you, the way that we're seeing these things go down, the attacks that we're seeing, and they are coming from nation states in many cases, we have to understand that this is really serious stuff. We're talking about billions of dollars in losses every year due to phishing, due to, email. It's incredible the kind of stuff that's going on out there. On top of that, you have ransomware that's happening. The city of Torrance out in California, they just got hit by a ransomware attack. Can you imagine in the middle of this pandemic having all of your city systems being taken down, right? This is just another one of those sorts of things. It is a big deal. It is something we have to take seriously, but we have to understand that it's all based on deception. These attacks work because they're attacking people and they're deceiving them. So we're going to talk about a few things here today, perception versus reality, understanding the OODA Loop. Not going deep dive on any of these, but I want to give you enough information so that it makes sense, and hopefully you walk away learning some things today. So as far as perception versus reality, we're going to start with this real quick. We're going to have a little fun. Something you may have never seen before in an online presentation. I am going to do a magic trick. Yes, that's right, folks. This is why my day job isn't in magic, but we're going to have a little fun with it. So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to ask you to pick a card. I want you to pick any of these cards right here, and I'm going to make that card disappear. So you should have your card picked right now, and bam, through the magic of a PowerPoint transition, this is where the magic really lies, is your card gone now, right? Everyone should be nodding their head. Yes, my card's gone. How is your card gone? That's amazing, right? Yes, it is amazing. But how did we do that? Well, first of all, we started with this group of cards. We ended with this group of cards. So what do you see different about those cards now? Well, you should be able to tell that they are two completely different decks of cards. But there's a few things put in place here that are designed to make you not notice that we just replaced them all. It doesn't matter which one you picked before, they're all gone, right? The idea is you have colors and pattern shapes there. You know, it starts with a red king, black king, and on the other side it's the black queen, black jacks. Those are designed so that, you know, the pattern is there to fool you. If I was to replace the deck and the second part there with a bunch of numbered cards, you'd see it immediately. But this is the kind of stuff that goes through our heads. This is messing with our heads and understanding how our psychology works and some deception piece. So another thing I want to talk about is our brain's job is to filter, interpret, and present reality. This is the root of deception. And what the key part to this is filter, interpret, and present. So we think that what we see, what we hear, what we taste, what we smell, all of these things are actual reality. But the truth is our brain builds in filters, and our brain is an incredible, incredible thing. But think about this, right? How many of you remember seeing that thing, which is, you know, what color is the dress, right? Is it blue and black or white and gold? Okay. Two people sitting at the same place, looking at the same monitor, saw two very different things. Now, your brain is involved in that filtering, or the audio file. It was Yanni or Laurel. There were both in that audio clip. You could actually, there were both in there. The thing is, once your brain picked one, it was extremely hard to hear the other because it filters that out. Two more examples. Your brain actually syncs up sound, like a door closing from a certain distance away. It sounds like the door is closing. You hear the door close along with the physical act of it up into a certain point. And I want to say it's 10 milliseconds is the difference in time. But that's when you see the door close first and then you hear the sound. But your brain actually syncs them up at the same time for up until that point. It's an amazing thing. And last but not least, how many of you can see your nose if you look to the side? If you're not looking for it, your brain filters out your nose in your field of vision. It's amazing, but it's important to understand that our brain filters a lot of things. And one of the key ways to do this or to affect that is through emotions. If you've ever been upset, you've been mad, how hard is it to make a clear decision, right? And that's what the bad guys are really going for. They're trying to influence how your filters work and how reality is presented to you. So on that note, we're going to do a real quick talk about the OODA Loop. If you've never heard of the OODA Loop, it's a pretty amazing thing. Spies, magicians, pickpockets, con artists, all these people, they use this principle. Now, the OODA Loop, it's a model for decision making. That's the whole idea behind this. It's a model for decision making. And the way that it works, it was actually designed first for aviation warfare. And of course, these people are in there trying to, you know, do some amazing things very, very quickly. It is very important that your decision making is right. So that was the initial model was for this, but it's also been moved now to where it applies to business processes and lots of other things. But very importantly, it is this decision process. And this is what it actually lays out with. It's observe, orient, decide, and act. So the first part is you look around and you observe your environment. Now you orient yourself. That means where am I within this environment and where do I want to be? That's a key thing. So the next step is you decide what to do. Let's say I'm standing in one place and I want to be a step to the right. Well, I'm going to decide to take that step to the right, and then I'm going to act. Then I'm actually going to take that step. From there, we observe again. We look at the environment. am I where I want to be in the orient step, etc. You kind of get the idea. It's a constant loop, and it's a way that our brains work in a lot of very, important ways. It happens a lot of times that we don't even realize that this is going on, but this is putting some steps to our normal thought process. Now, the ideal situation for a social engineer is to hijack this OODA loop. And what it's going to do, what they want to do is they want to get you to do an action that bypasses those first three steps. So those first three steps, observe, orient, and decide, if you can mess with those things right there, you are impacting the action that comes with it. And those three steps are critical thinking. Now, why is that important? That's very important because, again, emotions affect our critical thinking. We can take emotions and we can get you to change what you think you're seeing, or change your observation, change where you think you are in it, or the decision you're going to make. Obviously, that is all going to change the action. Now, the bad guys use this because they want the action to be click on a link, enter some information, open a document, and enable macros. I mean, all of these things that sometimes we step back and we go, there's no way I would do that. And then next thing you know, it's happened, right? This is because, believe it or not, these guys are really good at this. One of the things I see people misunderstanding is the attacks that we see today in the modern day. These are not kids on the couch in their mom's basement, drinking Mountain Dew and eating pizza, right? These are organized cyber crime. A lot of them are organized crime groups that have moved into this. Some of them, like I said before, are nation-state groups. Some of them are just very organized groups of hackers. The important thing to understand is, and when I say hacker, I mean malicious hackers. The important thing to understand here is these are being run like a business. So they actually do essentially marketing campaigns. They track the performance of every kind of attack that they end up doing, and they do what we call in marketing like A/B campaigns. Oh, this was more effective than this one. We're going to start doing this. And they've been tweaking these for years now, and that's why they're so powerful. So don't underestimate that. So we're going to talk a little bit about how the social engineers do this, right? How do they subvert these components? Well, the first thing we got to understand is we are humans and we have vulnerabilities. And I love this show. If you've never seen it, it's called Mr. Robot. I will say first and second season were the best, right? But what I like about this show is it actually uses real tools. It uses real methodologies. The idea is it's about hacking in a rough sort of way. And I will warn you right now, if you do want to see this show, don't gather the kiddos up. It's pretty raw. It's not really a family show, if you will, with little kids. But it is real hacking. And one of the key things that they use is social engineering. And I love this quote by Elliot Alderson. He's kind of the main character here. I've never found it hard to hack most people. If you listen to them, watch them, their vulnerabilities are like a neon sign screwed into their heads. And that is true. Social engineers will talk to people and they will figure out what are their vulnerabilities, okay? And the vulnerabilities are fairly common, though, among people, right? Some people react to aggressive attacks by backing away. Some people get aggressive back towards it, right? Some people really want to be helpful. They see somebody in need and they want to help them out. There's a lot of these kinds of things that are vulnerabilities. That doesn't mean they're bad traits. That just means they're vulnerabilities that can be exploited. So the bad guys have figured out what works best, like what hits the biggest audiences with respect to these vulnerabilities. And that's what they go after. It's a human nature thing. There's nothing we as people can do about it because it is ingrained in our nature, okay? We have to be aware when we start noticing that these sorts of attacks may be happening. That's a key thing. A lot of times we're in a situation and it starts feeling a little weird, but we don't really understand why, and so therefore we don't do something about it. That's the important step. So to give you an idea, some of the things we've been seeing and how this stuff works, we've been seeing a lot of these coronavirus-based stuff. The stimulus-focused attacks have been huge. Okay, as people have started getting money, there was a lot of confusion, especially in the beginning. They're saying, we're going to get you money, but they weren't super clear on when exactly that was going to happen. So that was a problem. People are thirsty for this information. So like things like this went out. It says it's from American Express. It's obviously not. If you look at the underline there, sale at delivery dash whatever.info, that's not real. And it took you to a Google Doc. Okay. Now, a lot of times what they'll do in these, a lot of times they will gather sensitive information. Like these were used, they'd say, oh, we need to confirm your bank account, or we need to confirm your social security number in order to make sure that you get this payment, right? These are the kinds of things they were doing, or they would have you log into a fake bank login screen and steal your credentials for banking, right? So we saw a lot of these. We saw a similar one like this. This was another one here, supposed to be coming from the WHO, right? See, it's coming from gmail.com. I mean, really? It's another one of these things. You click on it here. It's going to take you to a site, maybe hosting malware. It can do a login portal. They will reuse these templates sometimes to capture different things. They're very efficient with these things, right? But they use the WHO to lend credibility to this message. And we saw attacks way back when with the WHO, where they were trying to get people to, they were saying, we're releasing information. We need you to log into this portal in order to do it. And they were using that to try to steal credentials. They know that people reuse credentials in multiple places. So they were trying to get people to give stuff up like that. Also, when it comes to COVID-19 itself, we saw these ones here. These are using the White House to make it look like it's a little bit more credible. This is talking about the guidance, right? And so they were getting people to go and open these documents. This one would take you to a website that would then, it looked very official, and then you would download this document. When you open it, it would ask you to enable macros and allow editing or allow content. And it was infected. It was infected with malware. So it would start dropping bad stuff on your machine. But people were wanting to know, what is the guidance? What are we doing? There was a lot of information going around that's not real clear. And even right now, with all the talks about when we're going to reopen and things like that, people are thirsting for information again. And once again, this was an interesting one. Now, if you look at this, the grammar and spelling in here is just horrible. But this was supposed to be from Mike Pence, the VP, going out to small businesses. And it's basically saying, oh my gosh, all these things are happening, so on and so forth. We believe you're guilty of this. I'm reaching out to you because, yeah, that's going to happen. But it was, Vice President of the United States. The grammar and stuff is horrible. But here's what you have. You have small business owners that are, quite frankly, a lot of them are struggling right now as it is. They're already under tremendous stress. How am I going to make payroll? Am I going to be able to open my doors again? What's going on? And then you have something like this pop into your email. And the thing about this was there were no links. There was none of that. The idea was they reply to this person thinking that it's from, something official. And then what they do is they build that rapport. And eventually most of these turn around where they end up saying, if you just pay a fine right now, we will not go after this. We don't have a chance right now to deal with this. It's so busy. Just pay the fine and we'll let it go this time. Don't ever do anything like this again. And that's the trick there. They get them to send money. So last but not least, Clickbait, we see these ads all over. You won't believe what they caught the cashier doing, blah, 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 blah. Or, 5 steps to this. Number 4 will blow your mind. There's psychology behind this. It's scientific, actually. It leverages pattern interruption to basically apply what's called the information gap theory. And what that is they give you a little bit of information, but not enough. And then we have that FOMO, or fear of missing out. And we're compelled to now click on these things to find out what it is that we're missing out on. Some of these also, if you've seen them, they leverage outrage and anger, which drives us to take action. 2 of the strongest human emotions that are going to get somebody to take an action is outrage and anger. If you can make them angry, you can outrage them about something, they will follow your lead. We see that a lot, and I can't believe this political person did this. Go here, sign this petition, to which, of course, they need to confirm that you are, really a person with a lot of private information. But we see that those are the outrage attacks like that. So last but, one of the other things we see actually here is The business email compromise, right? CEO fraud. A lot of times this is wire transfer stuff. Need you to send money, need you to do this. See a lot of money go out on this. Also, supply chain and invoice fraud. This is where people get into an email account. They trick somebody into logging into what they think is their email portal. They take those credentials, log into the email. Now they sit there and they watch the email account. Or sometimes they take a more active role quickly. But either way, they'll either pop in when an invoice is due and say, oh, I gave you the wrong account number. And remember, this is coming from the real account because the bad guys are in there. Or they'll actually just start sending invoices to people saying, hey, this is overdue, this is overdue. And because it comes from a legitimate account, it can be very, very effective, really. And by the time everybody straightens everything out, the money's already gone, right? But these are very, very effective. Mostly what they do is they attack people to get them to give up their logins for their email, and then it's just game over. We see the same sorts of things with real estate in commercial and private side, where it's time to wire transfer a escrow payment or down payment. We see a lot of that stuff happen here. Very, very common, very effective. Now, if you want to see something that's just mind-blowing here, this is a 48-year-old Lithuanian guy. He spun up some offshore companies that were very similar in name to companies that serviced Google and Facebook. And what he did is he just started sending them invoices. And between them, they paid $100 million before they shut it down, just in fake invoices. Now, these are the sorts of things that are going to be happening to people because they're home. You're not in that usual office environment where you can tap someone on the shoulder and go, Bob, is this really, And so by separating people, they're more prone to falling for things like this because it's harder to confirm sometimes. Where, frankly, a lot of people working from home are distracted. They may be homeschooling their kids, the dog may be barking, there may be all kinds of other stuff going on. This is what they're counting on when people are at home. So it makes us even more, susceptible to these. So what do we do about it? How do we defend? Well, first of all, we got to understand the social engineering piece, which we've talked about it, at length here. But understand, you got to look at whether or not you think you're being manipulated. Now, what does that mean? If you get that email, you get that text message, you get that phone call that makes you go, something doesn't feel right about this, pay attention to that. I call it the spidey sense, right? Pay attention to that. And that's what we need to teach people to do is don't discount that. We have amazing insight into this as humans in a subconscious way where we go, something just seems off about that. And whenever we talk to somebody after an attack happens and after it's gone bad, when we get back to the root cause of it, it's so often phishing, right? They end up saying, yeah, something seemed weird at the time, but I didn't know who to talk to, or I thought it was just me being paranoid. We need to teach people to act on those. Now, the common lures they use, greed, Nigerian prince scam, right? Anyone seen that one? Still happens, not as common, but those types of things, something for nothing, right? Curiosity, self-interest, urgency. There's almost always a sense of urgency. I think I've only heard one person ever tell me that they saw an email that was like, yeah, so whenever you can get around to it or feel like it, do this. No, it's always, this is going to happen. There's something that's really hinging on this. There's a sense of urgency always. There's sometimes fear. There's the threats, like we saw with the Mike Pence one. We see that sometimes from the bad guys. And helpfulness, right? Fake charities, things like that. Those fall into the helpfulness. When we see an email, a text message, or a phone call, and it gives us an emotional response, that's when I want to tell people to be very, very careful. That's a very important piece here. Now, when it comes to looking at the emails, we don't expect to train people to be technical. There's no way we want people in marketing and accounting digging into email headers behind the scenes, trying to figure out where they came from, right? It doesn't make sense to do that. And that's a problem that a lot of times as technical people, if we try to train non-technical people, we get that part wrong. And that's why, I'll be honest, I love having a third party doing training because it's designed to actually touch base with these people, right? It resonates with them. It's relevant. What we try to teach people is do this: 22 red flags. This is actually a PDF we have available. It's fantastic. People print it up, put it on their desk. But basically, it gives you the things that you can look at to go, hey, maybe this is wrong. And I like to say, you get an email at 2 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday from your HR department, and that's unusual. Maybe I ought to pay more, attention to this or report it. And I'm a big fan of reporting, not just trashing emails. So the idea is somebody in an organization is the place where these emails go to be checked out. We have a free tool. There's lots of them out there. We call it the Phish Alert button. Goes in your browser. Person thinks it's a phishing email. They hit the button. It wraps it up with all the information that people need and sends it to somebody on your team. Could be your IT guys, your security team, whatever, whomever you want it to go to. And they can take a look at it and go, yeah, this is real, or no, it's actually legitimate. That way these people in accounting aren't trying to deal with that, right? That's not their job. But this is the red flags that we like to say, look at these things real quick and then do that report if things seem off, right? Did it come from who it says it came from? Is there a link? Does it go where they say, et cetera, et cetera? So the other question I get asked a ton is, can you really train people? And as technical people, sometimes we're jaded towards that. And people don't feel that they can actually train people. And I'll tell you right now, it's because, again, we're technical people training non-technical people. And a lot of times what we tell them doesn't make sense to them, right? Our brains work a little bit differently. But I can tell you right now, the proof is in the pudding. We can train people. This is 4 million users. We studied them. This is average click rate, 37.9%. That's a huge issue. Okay, when you come to phishing emails and they're clicking almost 38% of the time, that's big. By training them and doing one or two of those simulated phishing things, within 3 months it was down to 14%, so cut way less than in half. And at the end of a year, down to 4.7%. That's pretty substantial what's going on there. It's amazing how much training can make a difference. And let's be clear, people, there is no single silver bullet to stop all of this. It requires technical things like endpoint protection, email gateways, and filters. This is one piece in that. It's a substantial piece, but this is one piece in that. So as you can see here, it makes a big difference. And if you want to find out what your baseline phish-prone percentage is, we can actually do a free phishing security test. Get a hold of the folks at DataVox. They can set you up for that, and you can find out where you stand. What I find is a lot of people go, wow, I had no idea it was that bad. And it's really easy to do. Again, no charge. It's just it's something that we do so that people can get an understanding. Now, the way that we do the training is it's basically 4 steps. And we're trying to make employees make smarter security decisions every day. That's really the goal here. So we like to do that baseline test so you know where you're at. Then you train people. You do a couple of those simulated phishing attacks. Keep an idea on those simulated phishing attacks, or keep an eye on those. And as they get better, you're going to make them a little bit tougher, right? So as they're spotting, almost all of them, and your click rate gets down to 1% to 2%, and it can very, very often, then you make them a little bit harder, because you don't want to start it off where it's so hard they can't get them. You want some successes there. But the idea is to remind them that this is going on and to give them a chance to practice it in a fail-safe environment. That's really the key to this. And it makes such a huge difference. And quite frankly, the cost is so minimal on this. It's kind of a no-brainer once you look at how it all goes together. So having said that, DataVox can help you here. We see a lot of HR departments that run training programs for employees. They can help you there. If you're an IT person or a security person, wants to learn more about protecting your organization against these sorts of attacks, reach out to DataVox. They can help, and they'll be on in a little bit to chat a little bit more about that side of things. So from me, this is about all I have for slides. I'd like to go to Q&A if we can. So what do we have for a Q&A there, Meredith? I think you're doing that, right?
Great. Thanks, Eric. Good morning, all. My name is Meredith Cook. I'm the Global Channel Marketing Manager here at KnowBe4, and I'm facilitating our Q&A session. Again, we are accepting questions to the Q&A feature within WebEx along the right panel of your screen. Looks like we've received a couple already, but if you would take a moment and please enter your questions there so that I can pose them to Eric. Eric, let's see here. Is it a cloud-based solution?
Yes, and that's the beauty of this. It is on-demand, online training and phishing. It's all cloud-based. It's a software as a service model. It's a per seat per year licensing, which is really easy to manage. And the key is the wonderful thing about this is even as this is going on in the middle of this COVID crisis where everybody's scattered to the wind, even with this going on, it's actually really easy to deploy, and we can get you set up oftentimes within a day or so of getting this training started for your people that are already out there that are under attack. And that's what I love about it. It is so low effort compared to so many other security things we do, right? If we want to install new security software or hardware, it's usually quite a bit of a challenge. That I know I've been in the boat where it takes months to do that. This is something you can have up and running in a day or maybe a couple of days at tops. It's really amazing how quickly it works because it's cloud-based.
Great. Thanks, Eric. Next one. What is the best thing we as individuals can do to protect ourselves against these kinds of attacks?
Yeah, so individuals, again, if you get something that upsets you or makes you a little bit tense, take a deep breath and try to really work through reapplying those critical thinking skills. Start looking at it going, I don't know if this is right. And if it's something major, right, go to that website. Like if it's a major announcement from the White House or something, go to the webhouse or go to the White House website and see if it's there, because more than likely it's going to be there, right? Or Google whatever it's saying. Like you can kind of pick out some of those key phrases that are in there. You've been awarded blah, blah, blah. So copy, paste that into Google and see if there's other instances where people have said, yeah, no, this is not legit at all. Take the time to do that. Be very, very cautious. I'm not going to lie. Yesterday, I got a message from a friend of mine. They got a text message from a school district in Arizona, where I'm originally from. And it said, hey, we need you to go here if you think your kid's going to go back to school in this new school district. And it was just out of the blue, from nowhere, a text message with a bit.ly link in it. And she hit me up and she's like, man, this just doesn't make sense to me. And so I did a little research for her. And what I did is I ended up, first of all, I took the link over to, a secure machine that I have over here for playing around with stuff like that. And I launched it, and it took me to this website that was actually a Google document asking about their kids' stuff. And what I did then is I took that school district name, and I went to the school district website. And sure enough, they actually had a link from that school district website to the same place that I had just gone. So that tells me that actually was legitimate. However, it was extremely poorly implemented and executed to just send a link to somebody, a shortened link to somebody in a text message. But that's the hard part. Sometimes they're legitimate, sometimes they're not. It's a matter of doing a little bit of research when it comes to that. If you don't know how to do that, find someone in your organization, find out who it is you would send that to ask the questions to, and don't hesitate to ask those questions. I can tell you, as an IT guy, I would rather have had somebody come to me 100 times with ones that were legitimate, that were okay, than have them click on the one that isn't. So they'll be very grateful if you do that.
Sure, and I think that's a great segue to our next question. How do we, or the users, know the difference between the test email and the real deal?
That's the beauty. You're not supposed to, quite frankly. They will have the red flags in there. Now, here's the thing. With our platform, if you click on the one that is the fake, is the one from us, the simulated one, it will take you to a landing page that'll usually say something like, whoops, you messed up. It will tell you then and there that, oh, I made a mistake. Okay, that is the key right there. Is it will do that. If you use our phishing reporting platform, or our button, again, that free button called the Phish Alert button, if you report that email, it'll actually pop up and say, congratulations, you reported a simulated phishing message. So it does give you feedback right then and there. But looking at the email itself, they're actually designed to look just like the ones that are coming from the bad guys. Because, again, We want to inoculate you to those. So it's not trying to trick the users. It's not trying to do anything malicious like that. It's trying to help them learn how to spot these ones here. That's the whole goal here. It isn't to make them feel bad or look bad or any of that sort of stuff. It's to protect them by exposing them to what's really going on in the real world and doing it in a manner that's actually helpful and you can learn from.
Great. Eric, I know we've got a few minutes left with you, so I think this is a great one to close our time with you. And then for all questions related to pricing, I would advise connecting with your DataVox team. But Eric, the presentation mentioned after 12 months, the percentage on average drops to 4.7, but that is still risky for the organization, is it not? I understand we want to reduce the risk, but it looks like there is no end to this.
And that is that's a true statement. But let me put it to you in perspective, right? Having done this for years, if I have a security control that's failing 39% of the time or 37% of the time, I'm going to want to do something about it, right? And again, I said there is no silver bullet. But what we do is we build these layers. So the first one being we have the email gateways, right? We try to block them coming in. So maybe of those 18 million per day that Google is seeing, maybe they block 90% of what's actually coming in. That still leaves 10%, which is, still a pretty big number, 10% of 18 million. But those end up getting to the users. Now, here's where the user is hopefully going to spot those and get rid of them. So they're cutting it down pretty significantly. Now, you still need the endpoint protection because of those percentage. Every once in a while, somebody is going to click on something. You want your endpoint protection there to catch it. You want your other tools in place to protect it as well. That's the thing. We don't call ourselves a solution because there is no solution, right? But I will tell you this. When it hits the end user, this is where things pivot from being proactive to reactive. And once that user clicks that link or opens that document and hits enable content, you're now reacting to an incident as opposed to preventing it. They're that pivot point for that. So there is honestly, in my opinion, no better place to put that. And if you look at it from that standpoint, and you look at the reduction in risk and how much that happens over that time frame, it is substantial, even with 4%. Now, I'll tell you this. I've talked to a lot of places that get down below 1%, 2%. It happens quite often. It just depends on how much effort you're putting into it and how much this is becoming a part of your corporate culture. But it's pretty amazing that those 4 million people in 1 year can drop down to that level.
Great. Thanks, Eric. Well, that's it for questions. I'm going to pass it back over to the DataVox team. For any other questions, please do reach out to DataVox. I know there are a few we didn't answer, and I would love to get you guys answers. So thanks all.
Perfect. I appreciate that, Eric. This is Greg from DataVox. There's an analogy that you kind of started down a path early on, and something I hadn't really thought about, but sort of relevant to the times we're all living in, and the news that is the only thing to watch during the day. But thinking about this thing kind of from the perspective and the analogy of the COVID virus, and the idea that educating people on how to avoid the virus by washing their hands or social distancing has had some positive and proven results. In the same way we would educate people against cybersecurity, vulnerability, and phishing, and these types of things has positive and proven results. The more people that we can keep from falling victim to it, the better. And that's not to say that you don't need vaccines and preventative medicine, just like you did, kind of akin to firewalls and endpoint protection. But if we can avoid people coming in contact with it or falling victim to it in a cybersecurity scenario, it's all the better. And we're not relying on those, vaccines and medicines or those firewalls and endpoint protection. So I thought that was a pretty neat analogy that Eric had introduced there, and something I hadn't thought of before. Couple more things. So one of the things that Eric didn't mention along the way, but just to kind of brag on them a little bit, for those of you that follow Gartner closely, KnowBe4 is by far and away the leader in the Magic Quadrant around security awareness training. So oftentimes it's very close. In this case, it's not even close. They're by far and away the leader in that space. Also wanted to mention that there are additional training capabilities delivered through KnowBe4 outside of just cybersecurity. So we use this within our own organization, and it's the charge is kind of led by HR in our case, working with IT on the cybersecurity stuff. But they also use it for diversity, workplace culture, compliance, those types of things. There's additional training capability in there. So if you're curious about those capabilities and you want to learn more, just reach out to DataVox and we'll plug you into the right people to get you some education on those types of things. Eric did mention the free phishing trial, so that offer is out there for anybody that attended the call. It's very easy for us to do. We can administer the free phishing test for up to 100 users. You get a nice report, gives you some benchmarks against other organizations out there, and it's a great tool that you can share with management, might help you get some sponsorship for why it's so important to do something like that. And lastly, I wanted to advertise, we've got another webinar at 2 p.m. Central Time this afternoon. And we're fortunate enough to have an ex-FBI cybersecurity specialist presenting on current security trending, and that's in partnership with HP Enterprise. So if you're available, love to have you back at 2 p.m. Central Time for that session. I think you'll find it to be very, very good. With that, over to you, Jessica.
Thank you so much, Greg, and thank you all for joining us today. As a reminder, the recording link for today's session will be emailed to all attendees 24 to 48 hours post-event. If you did enjoy today's session and would like to hear more, we do offer new webinars weekly. Please check our DataVox website for more information on upcoming sessions. And as always, we would love to hear your feedback on our event. Once this webinar has ended, you will be redirected to a survey page. If you could please take a moment to complete the survey before closing out your browser, we'd greatly appreciate it. That concludes our session for today. Thank you again to Eric for a great presentation, and thank you all for joining us. Have a great rest of your day.